to another book review. I am so excited about the book today, and I can't wait to share with you all of my thoughts about the book, and I hope that by the end you love it just as much as I do. Hopefully you'll stick around through all my ramblings until the end and then share some of your thoughts as well with me. So you know from the title, but the book I'm reviewing today is this beautiful book, which is called Missing Witches: Recovering True Histories of Feminist Magic by Risa Dickens and Amy Torok. And it was sent to me very kindly by the people at North Atlantic Books, who are a non-profit book publisher, so a huge thank you to them for sending me this book in exchange for a review. Right, let's get straight on with it then, because today is a big review. There's just so much that I want to talk about, so let's get straight to it. The book then, as I mentioned, is written by Risa Dickens and Amy Torok, and they met backstage at a ukulele showcase, which is a very interesting sort of how did you meet story, and they live, as described by themselves, tucked into the woods of Quebec, which, to be honest, just sounds like my absolute dream. So other than the book, together they have created music, they have a coven, a podcast on which the book is based, but I will come to that a little bit later. So Risa has a BA degree in English literature and a master's degree in communications. She helped found Worn, which was a feminist fashion journal, all about feminist fashion history. It's not actually being published anymore, but there are some sort of back issues that you can get hold of, and there has been a book, sort of like an archive book, which looked really interesting. And currently Risa is working in marketing, PR and community building. Amy also has a BA degree in English literature, but her postgraduate diploma is in journalism. She teaches English as a second language and is a musician, an artist and a designer. I will put all the links to their social media and all of their projects and things in the description below, so that you can check them out if you feel inclined to do so. Okay, a little bit about the book then, if you're not familiar with the concept of it. So it's basically organised using the Wheel of the Year. Each Sabbath features the histories of two women. They work sort of like mini biographies, I suppose, of inspiring women. Some, like Doreen Valiente, for example, are self-proclaimed witches or Wiccans. Others are women who may not necessarily have called themselves a witch or considered themselves witches, but they are very spiritual, and they work their magic in other ways. So, for example, through art, through poetry, through activism, through the cultural sciences. As I mentioned, Risa and Amy are very educated ladies, and I love how they've brought that into the book. So everything is sourced and cited and referenced like an academic paper, and it makes my academic heart very happy. One, because I love the organisation of it, and two, because it makes it so easy to continue your own reading and research into the areas that interest you. So I'll just give you a little look at the back of the book. So like I was saying, it's all sourced and everything. So at the back it's got notes, so for each chapter it's got all their citations in there, and then a little bit further on there's also so many notes, as you can see, so many notes. They go on forever. And there's also a bibliography, again organised by chapter, of all the books that they talk about, and they've referenced in each of the different chapters, and again there's so many of them. So it's a huge resource sort of within itself, which I think is really great. The book as well then is based on the podcast that is run by Amy and Risa of the same name, which just shares stories and histories of the witches that we've been missing. It mentions in the book as well that Sandra Huber also uses the podcast as a teaching aid for her class at a university. So the class is called Anthropology of Magic, Religion, Science and Ideology. So it just shows you how much research and work the ladies have put into their podcast and into their book. And does anyone else really want to take that class? Intertwined with the histories of the women that they feature then are also some personal anecdotes and stories from the two authors, along with a ritual that allows you to connect with the themes and the ideas of each chapter. And it's worth noting at this point as well that the book is very diverse in terms of the women that are featured within it, and it doesn't just focus on Western witchcraft. Right, time to get onto my thoughts about the book then. So as soon as I started reading the introduction, so there's a foreword which is written by Amanda Yates Garcia, I knew that I was going to absolutely love the book. It's just like a really uplifting pep talk, and it just sets the right tone for the book. And it has made me even more eager to read Amanda's book that she's written called Initiated Memoir of a Witch, which again just sounds really interesting. And just because I really loved her words and her writing in the introduction. And apparently she does also have a podcast herself, which is called Between the Worlds, which I've not listened to yet, but it's definitely one that I'm going to look at. Also in the introduction, they explain why they've chosen to organise the book using the Wheel of the Year, and it's such a great explanation. So they say it's because it's consistent, it never changes, and it's something that is continuous for everyone across the world. So no matter your faith, your religion, your beliefs, or even if you don't have any, the Wheel of the Year and the changing of the seasons is there. It's something that we all witness and experience, and I think that's just a really lovely thought. So if you're anything like me and you have struggled to find stories and histories of real witches, then this book is definitely going to help you in that area. I've read so many books with variations on the title History of Witchcraft, and like they say in this book, they usually talk about European and American witch hunts, and then they jump to things or people such as Aleister Crowley, Gerald Gardner, and Scott Cunningham, as though they're rediscovering something that has sort of just laid dormant. Don't get me wrong, I do love Scott Cunningham. He was one of the first books that I got that introduced me to Wicca. But when I was reading those histories, those witchy history books, I did always feel like something was missing. Sort of like, well, where were the women at this point? You know, it's been in history that women were accused of witchcraft. I'm not saying it was just women, but, you know, predominantly. So what happened to all these women over the years? There just seemed to be a gap that needed to be filled, and that's exactly what this book has done. It's filled in some of the history of witchcraft, magic, spiritual beliefs that have always been there. These women have always been there, living their witchy lives, but they've just been hidden. So coming on to the histories that they actually explore in the book then, so they are all linked to extremely relevant issues, so things like racism, transphobia, gender identity, among just a few things. Yet we're looking at them through sort of a historic lens, if that makes sense. And it does add further context to the stories that they are telling, the histories that they're talking about, whilst also bringing these ideas right up to date. One worthwhile tangent that's really stood out to me in particular was the constructive and really thoughtful criticism that they give of the male and female binary. It just made so much sense to me. I do also feel as well that they bring a lot of credibility to the study of witchcraft. They address the cynicism that does come from people when you say you are a witch or that you practice witchcraft, but it is also a stark reminder that we can freely refer to ourselves as a witch, and the most negativity that I'm going to get personally is probably a wry smile or a little giggle or something like that. Yet in other parts of the world there are women that are still being murdered as witches, so they're really not afraid to tackle sort of this dark side of witchcraft and just in general. In that same vein as well, they do explore and critique the problematic New Age spirituality, particularly in the West, which can be very damaging. Things like gatekeeping, cultural appropriation of indigenous spiritualities, and for me it's just really emphasised how important it is to research and to understand where these practices, these ideas and these beliefs are coming from, and that's really the best way that you can connect and engage with your craft. I like the way they sort of sum this up in the book, and it very much mirrors my own practice. So they say, our beliefs are much more deeply rooted in research than in blind faith, and that's just a really important sentiment. As well as the academic vibe that they have going through the book, it is also deeply personal. So the stories and the histories of the missing witches that they share are intertwined with personal stories from Risa and Amy. It's like they're sharing parts of their own stories while sharing the stories of others. And I just really love that vibe, that sort of personal connection that you get with this book. They are both really brave to lay so much of themselves out there for everyone to read, but then it makes you and us and the reader just feel like we're not alone. For example, at the beginning of the book, Risa shares the story of when she gave birth to her daughter, and it just gave me all the emotions while I was reading that. So even though it's not something that I necessarily can relate to, it just was really brave, honest and extremely powerful to read. She does say, and she believes that she's being over dramatic, as though she's taking up space with the story, when there are women who may have experienced more difficult births than her. But I really don't think anybody should be made to feel like that. It doesn't matter what your story is, you should be able to tell it. And I think that actually more of these brutally honest stories from women should be told. And that idea of not telling your own story for fear of taking up space that belongs to someone else, it really hit home, especially when in sort of, I think it's the next chapter or a couple of chapters after, Amy talks about her struggles with anxiety. I very rarely talk about my own mental health issues publicly for that very reason, and just because I'm not comfortable sharing it or even putting it into words. But I could definitely relate to a lot of the things that Amy was saying. For example, I feel like I have spent most of my life being scared and doing it anyway. But actually having done that for, like I said, most of my life, eventually it just became too much for my mind and my body, and eventually it was just like, no, that's it, we're done. But hopefully now I'm learning some strategies to deal with that, and the medication and things help. Amy shares something that has helped her anxiety, and that's through asking herself specific questions, and it just makes so much sense to me. I won't share them because I think I don't really want to give too much away from the book, but it's a really honest and open insight into anxiety, and I felt that I could relate to a lot of the things that she was saying. It's not just about the stories that they tell as well, it's the way that they tell them. So their writing style and the voice that they put across is just so visual and so literary. It's full of metaphors and imagery, I think it may come from the podcast because when they're talking, it sounds very much similar to how they write. I have listened to a few of the podcasts now, and I can't remember if it's Risa or Amy, sorry, but one of them delivers the podcast and their voice is just so beautiful to listen to. I'm not usually one for listening to podcasts, if I'm honest, just because I've got a thing about people's voices, but it is just so gentle and it's a very relaxing tone. And I think that all the things that work so well in the podcast come across really great in the book as well. I think at this point as well, I just want to mention that I personally would give the book a little bit of a warning. So Risa and Amy are not afraid to talk about difficult topics or problematic ancestors, and they are not going to ignore things or gloss over details just because people may feel uncomfortable or may not like them. And so they shouldn't. I think it's really great what they've done with the book and how they explain and explore these problematic ancestors, as they call them. They are telling the true histories, but just so that people are aware before they go into the book, some of the things that they talk about are drug use, abuse, ritual sacrifice of animals, and there is the story of a woman who is a trans-exclusionary radical feminist. So this is by no means a negative. If anything, I think it's one of the positive things about the book. So the way that they openly talk about these topics is important, and they offered their perspectives while still allowing you to have your own opinions and to contemplate these ideas for yourself. Time for some final thoughts then. So I really did love this book for so many different reasons. I learned about women that I otherwise wouldn't know about, particularly women of colour as well. It also introduced me to women from a range of disciplines, so from artists and poets to archaeologists and anthropologists. It's provided me with so many new avenues for research and study. I was constantly making notes of all the things and all the people that I wanted to read more about. They really do make you want to keep exploring and learning, and they provide you with the opportunities to do that. And like I said, I now have a huge list of books from the bibliography that I want to read. And it did remind me that there is so much more to witchcraft than spells and rituals. It's about doing what's right for yourself and everyone else in the world. So through the stories of the witches and the women, it offers a deeper understanding of witchcraft. So where the beliefs, the ideology and the symbolism come from. I apologise for the cattail that is currently in view right now, but she won't move. So at this point, I usually do say who I think the book is for. I imagine if you listen to the podcast, then you've probably already got the book. But if not, and you do love the podcast, then you are going to love the book. But I would say, yes, it's for witches, it's for women, it's for feminists. But honestly, I think I'm at that point where I am just going to recommend this book to everyone. I believe it does what it set out to do, which is to recover the histories of women otherwise hidden, forgotten about, or missing. And it provided Amy and Risa with a place to put all of their research. And I'm so glad it did, because it's opened up so much for me and my craft. It is one of my favourite books of the year, and it's only the second book of this year that I have given 5 stars to on my Goodreads, the other being Rebel Witch by Kellyanne Maddox. I very rarely give 5 stars to books over on Goodreads. It has literally got to be perfect for me to give it 5 stars, but it just tells you how much I loved it, really. I really think that there needs to be a book 2, but until then I think I'm probably just going to read it again. Okay guys, if you stuck around through that whole review, then thank you so much. If you've read the book, I'd love to know what your thoughts are. And if you are interested in the book, then I will put the link below. Thank you again for watching guys, and I will see you in the next video.